All right. How's it going, everybody? I am Blaine from AceMind. Today, I'm just going to be showing you how to use our tools for NBA, specifically our sims. So for those of you that don't know, my buddy Chan and I started AceMind a year ago, but really we built the initial Git repos in 2020 or 2021. They're still available for free on GitHub. There are links to our Discord. But anyway, so we have these free GitHub repos, and we just decided to throw a UI on them. So we've been around for a while. We've been building these tools. And so Chan is pretty much responsible for the optimizer side, and I am kind of responsible for all the sim stuff. So all the sim stuff I have built, so I have pretty good understanding of how all this stuff works. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into NBA, and we're going to start Simulator NBA, DraftKings Classic, and then let's choose today's slate. And let's just sim a small contest so we could test some stuff out. Let's do the Mega 8s today, okay? And so first what I'm going to do is we have our projection screen here, chosen the contest. And now all this stuff is blank. Right now we don't have NBA projections. I expect in a couple of weeks we're going to have NBA projections. We have a partner that we're having an agreement with, and we're just kind of figuring out the back end stuff. So right now I'm just going to use Stochastic, and the Stochastic boom bust is pretty much just plug and play with our tool. So I'm going to download it as a CSV. Then we'll go back into here, import projections, and we'll copy and paste, download here, boom. Whoop, white screen. Video driver's freaking out. There we go. Okay, so I've imported our boom bust, right? And now we have a projection mapping tool. So we're taking your projection file, we're mapping it with the player names or IDs. Ideally, you have the IDs on your import, but it's okay if you just have the names and the teams. That's how we're matching stuff up. Then we're matching up columns, right? So I can choose which column is my projection column. Technically, I could use ceiling or floor here, right? As is my projection. We'll leave it as projection for now. Minutes, you don't need minutes for sims for NBA. They're more on the optimizer side. So I'm just going to leave those blank. And then we have ownership percentage. You absolutely have to have ownership for sims. Now, I'll explain why in a second, but what you can do if you don't have ownership is you can run an optimizer and then get the ownerships from that. So you can basically just run 500 lineups in optimizer with your projections, and then you can just kind of count, and what frequency people show up, that's your ownership. It's usually a pretty decent estimate. I know actually a lot of sites still kind of use that methodology of just create a bunch of optimal lineups and just see how much each player shows up. Totally fine to do that way, but you absolutely have to have ownership. And then standard deviation, you don't necessarily have to have standard deviation. The nice thing about Stochastic is they provide it with their projections. ETR provides ceiling, and then we're able to kind of back out standard deviation from that. So if your tool has a ceiling column, that also works. But ideally, you'd have standard deviation. And if you don't have standard deviation, we have a setting that kind of gives like a flat standard deviation to everybody based on their projection. Okay, and then we have field points. So field points are, I'll get into what they are, but basically, field points are what you think the field are going to be building their lineups with. So like, what is like the aggregate field projection? And the projection is like what your personal projections are. So this is kind of useful if, for example, you generate your own projections. Your projection set might be way different than, like, for example, what Stochastic is using, right? And so you would use Stochastic for your field points, but then you would use your own projections. And the idea is to simulate lineups with your projections against like a field that uses Stochastic projections. But in most cases, unless you really know what you're doing, in most cases, it's totally fine. Use projection value with your projections, okay? So we're going to import player data, and here we go. Now we have everything imported. We have Jokic, highest projected player tonight. Not surprising. One of the greatest players of all time. Unbelievable producer and of court. Also has the highest standard deviation. But you can notice a couple of things here about these projections, right? James Harden is actually projected for more points than Karl-Anthony Towns. But Karl-Anthony Towns has a higher standard deviation, right? There's a little more upside with Karl-Anthony Towns, probably because of like stock upside, blocks and steals. And so, that Karl-Anthony Towns, I'm expecting here, will simulate a little better than Harden just because his variance is higher, his ownership is lower. Okay, so we have our projections imported, right? And now we have our config here on the right, this panel. There's a lot of settings. I know there's a lot of settings, but the nice thing is once you kind of figure out what values you want, you can save them as a preset And now you can name it. So we'll call this our, we'll call it like small field high dollar GPP, right? Okay, so now this preset, this is just the default settings I'm saving, but now we have them, right? And now we have simulations per field generation. So first of all, let's just do this, right? Let's just set all these to the defaults, right? And we'll just use one generation. So one generation is going to be like one field sim. And let's just change this value. So we'll just do like, I think our minimum is actually 100. I don't even know if 100 is going to work. Let's just do 1,000 sims, right? So we'll do 1,000 sims. The reason why you would want to change this to be a super low value is like for NFL Showdown tonight. Showdown, there's only so many lineups that can possibly be made, right? On average, it's like 200,000 lineups, 150,000 lineups that you could possibly make for one NFL game. And that varies depending on the projections, the total of the game, and so on. Okay. So like what you could do is you could set for NFL Showdown or even NBA Showdown, you could set this to be like 100 sims and run 100 generations. And you're basically just mass producing lineups that you could filter out. So you could almost use it like a faster optimizer, because the way that we're generating lineups here is going to be a lot faster than how optimizers work. Okay, so we're just going to run 1,000 sims, and this is going to be super fast. And I'll kind of, as the progress log shows up when we run the sim, I'll kind of explain what's happening. But it might be too quick for me to explain. We'll see. So let's just run it. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to chat, and I can answer almost all of them, I promise. And it's good to distract me. Okay, so we got our progress log going. So now, nice thing about our sims is this is just a job that's running right now on the cloud for us. So you can click away from it and go back to SimOpto. We saved all your settings from when you previously hit run, so you can just get right back to it. But in this case, we're just going to go back to results, click on run. Here we go. Okay, so there's two components to sims, how our sims work. And our sims are pretty different from how the rest of the industry does it. So how like SaberSim, Stochastic, and ETR is the solver work, is they generate the field in advance for you, right? They have their own ownership projections that they're using, and they're kind of hand picking, hand tuning fields for you for large field contests, right? I guess they also do it for small field as well. I mean, it depends on the contest size. But anyway, so they are I'm going to go ahead and just open this up so I can show you the progress log. We can kind of go through each step in the progress log. Here we go. So other sites are generating the field in advance for you. They're also generating the player simulations in advance for you. So they have their own models that they're using, and they have their own projections, and how like they're just generating these distributions in advance for you based on their projections. And then you're kind of just generating lineups off of those, right? And comparing those to the fields that they made. What we're doing is we're doing that for you on the fly. So we generate a field for you based on your ownership and your field points. And then we also run player simulations based on your player projection and your standard deviation, right? So we're doing both. And that's why it is possible for ours to take a little longer. In this case, for like a small field, our sims are extremely fast. We spend a lot of time optimizing these things, and we've been pretty quick. So when we say like generating here, like we're generating lineups, we're generating the contest field. So all 375 lineups are going to be, if we click on the CSV button up here that says download all lineups, it'll output a CSV. I'm not going to share it, but it's 375 lineups. And actually, yes, it's 375 because there weren't any duplicates. It's 375 unique lineups in this case using our projections. Let's not share it yet, because this is not really showing like I don't want to show all the, ROIs and stuff yet. So that's kind of what we mean when we say generating lineups. We're generating the field for you based on your ownership and your I'm losing my train of thought, your field points, field projection. Okay. And so, for example, if we were to go back into the main menu here, into our sim, and let's just run 1,000 sims again, but this time let's set Jokic to 100% ownership. Okay. And obviously his ownership is, I think it was 33% when I edited it. That's okay. We're going to change it to 100% ownership. And we're going to wait for my computer to be unfrozen. There we go. Okay. We'll run 1,000 sims again. And we're going to make a Google Doc. And all I'm going to do here is just show you that Jokic is going to be in every single lineup that we're going to run. And actually, it is Okay, let me get to that in a second, Mookie. I'm not. So we're gonna run this. Oh, well, actually, it's okay. It's okay to do it this way. So I think it's already done. Maybe not. Let's find it. There we go. Okay. So I actually just ran 5 field simulations, which I'll explain in a second. But now this is going to be about 1,800 unique lineups that we're going to have. So let's just import these, and I'll show you how Jokic is going to be in almost every lineup. And I would imagine it's possible he could not be in every single one, but I'm almost positive he's going to be in every one. And I broke something. Okay, that's fine. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I'm not using the right ownership. Hold on. Let me do that again now. So what when we're creating the field using ownership, let's do like 99.99 or something. So what we're doing when we are creating lineups, we're taking like the optimal. So we'll find the optimal lineup given your field point projection, and then we use this max percent optimal setting. So this is like a multiplier off of the optimal. So say that the optimal lineup tonight is 300 fantasy points projected. We'll allow lineups to be built that are within 30% of that mark. So that would be that's for NBA. This 30% is pretty high for default, right? Because 30% of 300 is 90. So any lineup with 210 projection or above, we would allow to be in the field. For this contest, that's kind of unrealistic, right? That's okay. So what we're going to do here is Jokic 99%. We'll do this. We'll do this. And hopefully he shows up in all of them. Let's try that again. Yep. So this is what I'm getting at, Mookie. And so the way that we're actually creating the fields is we take ownership and we turn it into like a probability vector, right? So what is the chance that Jokic is in a random lineup? So let's go ahead and export these. And so all we're doing is just kind of like random sampling based on your ownership and deciding, okay, in this spot, you know, actually Jokic is probably a bad example because he's only eligible for 2 positions. So let me choose an example of a player who's like in every position. So we'll do Jaden Ivey, 30% owner night. Let's go 100%. He's eligible for 2 positions, and yeah, he's a good one. He's a good one to show what I'm trying to show here. So we make a probability vector out of the ownerships. We randomly sample from that to decide, is this player going to be in this lineup or not? And then we run it up against your config settings to decide, is this a valid lineup we can play? So does it fit within your, we have a max players per team setting. We have a max percent off optimal setting. We make sure that each lineup fits according to that. And now here we can see Jaden Ivey. These are just the top 20 by ROI. But Jaden Ivey is in a ton of these now. He was like 30% on. He's in a bunch. And so let's import that and make sure that's correct. And so because it's a random sampling, it is possible that we could set it to be like 100 or whatever, and that player could not be in every lineup. So if we were just to take, I'm going to do this really quickly. So Jaden Ivey, so we'll just do a quick count if. And we know that there's 375 lineups here. And we'll just count how many times he shows up. So 266 equals. So his ownership projection originally was 33%. I set it to be 100%, and he ended up in about 71% of lineups. So it's not like it's not perfectly 100%. What we could do if we really wanted Jaden Ivey to be in every single lineup is we could just say, okay, now his projection is now going to be, 150. Okay. And now I guarantee he's going to be in every lineup. Well, actually, I don't want to guarantee. Never guarantee in technology. So let's go ahead and run this again. And now all I did was I just changed his Jaden Ivey's projection to be 150. And now like every lineup, he's almost guaranteed to be in every lineup because there's no way you can make a lineup within 30% of the optimal that doesn't have him because his projection is so high. And now, yeah, see now how Jaden Ivey 100% in our top 20. If we're to export this and import it into here, this would be 100. So that's kind of like a quick and dirty way. If you need to lock a player in your sims for some reason, I don't really advise doing that, but you can. You can just turn their projection up really high, and they'll end up in every lineup you want to play. And also turn their ownership up as well. Makes it easier to sample them. And so anyway, getting back to what Mookie was saying here about how this own percentage can stay static across the field. So we have this setting called number of generations. And so you can think of this like I've talked about like genetic algorithms before. What genetic algorithms are doing, they're trying to imitate the evolutionary process of testing out different iterations of, in this case, lineups. And we're trying to find what are the best lineups, right? And so what we're doing is we are simulating the same contest over and over, but we're generating fresh lineups each time and generating fresh player projection or player simulations each time. But what we're also doing is in between generations, we are we're doing what's called jitter. So I don't want to have the same lineup sampled every single time. I'm going to go ahead and reset this data. I don't want the same lineups to be sampled every single time for my contest. I do want to keep like the top some percent of lineups to simulate them again to see if they simulate well across multiple runs. But we're jittering those ownership projections just a little bit in order to get a little more randomness in the fields. And it's really important for smaller field contests like the Mega 8s tonight with only 375 lineups. Because let's say, for example, Jokic projects really well, and we'll find a player down here. Malik Beasley projects really well. Malik, oh, okay, that's fun. Fun tonight for Malik Beasley. So let's say in our 375 lineups, somehow, just because of the randomness inherent in the way we're building lineups, let's say that Jokic and Beasley only appeared in one or two lineups together in our field. If we only sim that contest once, that lineup is likely going to have a super high ROI, right? And it won't be duplicated. But if we use multiple generations, we're going to end up with multiple lineups with that same combination. And that way we can see like, okay, maybe that Jokic Beasley lineup we got in the one generation we ran, maybe that lineup was just really good because of that one combination and the other players kind of didn't matter. And so we'll just test different versions of that lineup and we will find like what is the best combination of players to pair with that combination of players. So, it gets kind of inception level. Let me pause for a second. I'm going to drink my protein drink. And so what we're going to do now, we're going to run our defaults here are 50,000 sims per field generation. I think for NBA, because there's less variance in projections, you can lower this, especially for the super large field stuff. The fadeaway tonight, 17,000. Each run of the fadeaway takes about a minute, 2 minutes. So like if you want to do a lot of generations, you could always turn the sims down and be okay. So let's go ahead and run 10 generations of this contest. So we're going to resimulate this contest over and over. There's going to be slight variations in ownership. Why? Let me try re-importing. That's kind of weird that Zion and Brunson don't have any ownership at all. So we're going to re-import. Hopefully, Chan. Hopefully. Yep. That's also another good point Mookie made about how sometimes like a 1% projected player actually is like 5% is actually going to end up like 5% or 10% owned. And this is especially true in the DFS sim era where like people are just kind of running these automated tools and they're kind of being told who to play. It's because they aren't on the slate on DraftKings. Is that why? Or is this just like broken? Let's try. I'm kind of annoyed that my ownership didn't import for these guys. Like Jalen Johnson too? That can't be right. Let's Pelicans are on the slate. So let's go ahead and let's look at let me see how these imported off the template. Yeah, that's kind of weird. Zion and Brunson have no ownership on my template. There's actually a bunch of guys. Scottie Pippen Jr. This Porzingis. So this is something you want to double check when you're importing projections, obviously. I don't know why they're showing up as 0. But we could manually type these in if we wanted to. We also could go to ownership this way. And hopefully... And so if we look at ownership here, We'll go ahead. So a nice thing you can do is you can import multiple files at once. I'll import the boom bust, and then I'll import the actual ownership sheet just to see like if maybe there's an issue there. And we'll re-import. We got to remap everything. And so on the boom bust, ownership percentage is just 1. There's no space between the percentage sign and the P. On the actual ownership, there's a space. Make sure that that's the right column we want. So let's go ahead and redo this. Now Brunson and Jalen Johnson have ownership, but not Zion. What is going on with this? Not do any of the Pelicans? Ooh, we might have found a bug, ladies and gentlemen. We might have found a bug. I wonder if it's an NOP versus NO thing. That's very interesting. Okay, so you are going to want to double check this, obviously. So let's go ahead. I'll just manually type these in for the Pelicans. Actually, it'll be easier. It's okay. Let's just filter down. And I'll make a note to tell Trench Bomb. Oh, wait. Zion is not on here. Is this maybe this isn't a R bug? Maybe this is a stochastic bug. Huh? No Zion. So how did he end up with the projection? That's fascinating. I'm lost. Okay. So let's see. Is CJ McCollum projected? 0% ownership. All right. All these guys are 0%. So stochastic, this one's on you guys, okay? What's going on here? Fix your ownerships. Scottie Pippen Jr., does he have a projection? He has no ownership projection. Okay, so in this case, this is not a bug on our end. This is a stochastic data bug. Thank goodness that's not us. All right, so let's go ahead and just run this thing again, okay? 10 generations, 50,000 sims per generation. This will take about 2 or 3 minutes. Do we want to go into lineup scoring weights? Okay, so lineup holdover percentage. What this percentage is doing is between generations, so between contest sims, we let you keep X% of lineups from one generation to the next. So if you were to set this to like 100%, for example, we would generate the first field of 375 lineups, and then we would just keep the same 100% of lineups between generations, right? So you would end up, in essence, in this case, with 500,000 sims of that 375 lineup field. Usually, I'll set this to be like 5 to 8%. Don't put hyphens in here, please. Like 8% is a good number, I think. And so they're going to keep the top 8% by lineup score, which we'll talk about in a minute, between generations here, between our contest sims. So that way we're kind of testing. This lineup tested well in one contest sim. So let's try to retest it. Let's see how well it does. That's kind of the idea here. So this is really useful for like MMA or Showdown, these limited combination contests where like one lineup might have simmed really well just because it didn't have any duplicates. But when we sim it across multiple generations, actually it shows up with quite a few duplicates, or it doesn't sim quite as well because more duplicates there. Then we have this keep user lineups toggle. So one nice thing you can do on our site is we have our optimizer. So I'm just going to import our projections really quick. And we'll do boom bust. We're going to all these settings. And actually, yes. So I guess one other thing here about our projections is we have these saved projections here. Every time you make a change to projections, we save it for you, right? And you can actually dump these old ones if you want. But you could like bring up an old one and just have them, right? So here's from 245. Is this one where I changed Jaden Ivey? Where is he? No, it didn't say where I changed Jaden Ivey. Oh wait, that's ownership. Okay. So you're able to just kind of bring back your old projections if you want. So here's the one I just imported. Let's just do 20 lineups really quick just to show what's going on here. We're just going to run. I'm just going to use default settings on the optimizer. Nothing fancy here. All right. So this thing's done. So I'm going to export these lineups. Yeah, that'll be fine to do it that way. And then what I'm going to do is go back to our simulator. And we're going to go right back to our Mega 8s. Where is it? I know you're in here. Here it is. And we're going to import. We're going to pull up our saved projections. And now we're going to add lineups. And so I have these 20 lineups. Let's say, for example, I'm playing one lineup in this contest. I have these 20 lineups that I optimized. And now I want to just test these 20 lineups and just see what's the best. Let's just go ahead and import this way. So we have this button. When you run an optimizer job, we tell you, hey, you can import these lineups. And give it a second to run. Validating, come on. What's going on here? There we go. Okay, it did validate. I don't know why it took so long. And like when you bring in your own lineups here, there's a little CSV button here you can download. And on the output, we'll go back to this thing. On the output here, did it not run? Let's try that again. Why is our validator being weird? There we go. Okay. So let's see why these didn't upload. I was trying to make a point, and now I have to like go back and figure out why things are not working. Let's see. I feel like there's just something with the headers, but we could test. So we have our job lineups. So when we download the CSV, invalid lineup as blank or duplicates. Well, we have a bunch of undefined player IDs. That would explain the issue. I don't know why we have undefined. So the way that our lineup validator works, we're looking for the player IDs. You don't even need to include PJ Washington. You could just, let's say his ID was 1, 2, 3, 4. You could just do that, and we would know that's PJ Washington. So the reason why it's failing, we expect to see some numbers in here. And for some reason, we aren't seeing any numbers in our output, which is very strange. What happens if let me try just exporting these entries. All right, now it's going to work. So let's go back, and we might need to clean that up. So let's go back to add lineups, and let's try this again. Now they're uploaded. Okay, we have all 20. And so what we're going to do is we're going to do 5 generations, and we're going to switch keep user lineups on. So now what's going to happen is it's just going to keep the top 20. It's going to keep the 20 lineups that we're uploading across all simulations, all generations. So now I'm like, okay, I have this set of lineups that I want to try out in this contest. These are the lineups I'm choosing from. And now let me just try them against many different versions of the same contest to see which ones sim the best across the aggregate of all contests. And so that's what we're going to do here. We're going to do keep user lineups and turn that on. So we're going to test our top 20. And now we have this lineup scoring weights here. So the way that we rank our lineups, we allow you to rank by ROI, projection, ownership, top 1% finishes, and win percentage. Okay. And we're kind of like standardizing these. So they're all between 0 and 1. That way, like ROIs, if you get ROIs into the thousands for like a showdown or something, it's not overriding like a projection in the 100 or something. So we allow you to apply these weights to rank lineups for you. For NBA, I am typically running like for a smaller field, I might change this for like this contest, but I'm usually running like 60, 10, 20, and 10, right? So I still want a lot of weight on ROI just in case we end up with duplicates somehow. But I also want to make sure that we are factoring in the projection of the lineup. We really want to factor in the ownership, and we want to make sure that we're getting lineups that can win. And so, yeah, I'll show that in a second, Chan. And so now this is the weights that I've been using. We encourage experimentation. It doesn't cost us very much for you to keep running different settings and trying stuff out. And so we encourage it. we're setting up back testing stuff. We don't quite have it yet, but eventually we'll let you back test, and you can try different weights with back testing, which would be way better. But right now, like I think the best methodology is just simulate the contest with different weights, see which lineups bubble up to the top, and then just kind of see like, are these lineups that would actually play in the contest? If they are, great, then leave those weights. If they aren't, then you can try different weights. So in this case, 60% of weight on ROI, 10% on projection, 20% on ownership, and 10% on win percentage. And we're going to leave projection minimum just to be 9. That's totally fine for a large, this is a 6 gamer. For like a 2-game NBA slate, you might want to return this way down to like 0.1. For a large field, large contest like this, 9 is a fine number. Minimum lineup salary, I almost all for NBA, I would even argue you should make this, especially for this contest, you could even bring this up to 49,500. Max percent off optimal, I advise turning this down to about 15 to 20%. You can kind of do the math at the top of your head. If a lineup projects for 300 points and you allow lineups within 20% of that, you're going to end up with lineups that are projected at 240. So you kind of have to decide if that's really what you want. I think 15 is a good number. It's usually what I do. And then we have this default position variance. So what this is doing is, if you don't have a standard deviation, we're just taking this percentage and we're multiplying it by projection to give you a standard deviation number. So for LaMelo Ball tonight, if you gave him a 10% variance, his standard deviation would then be 5.25 fantasy points. So that's probably a little low. 20%, it's a pretty decent number, right? We can just kind of see from these, right? 20% of 64 is about 13. That's not bad. The thing about standard deviations is they will scale as the coefficient of variance. So like the standard deviation divided by projection, they will scale up as you go further down in salary, just because like here's an example, Tijani Salon, the rookie, he has almost a 50% coefficient of variation, right? 8 divided by 16. So like his would be 50%. But if you did 50% for everybody and you did that for Jokic, his standard deviation would be 32, right? That's ridiculous. So, that's not really, we don't really want to be, ideally, you're giving us a standard deviation for everybody. Best, if you don't have a number from a site, it's best to kind of make a formula yourself in Excel. It's super easy. Just ask ChatGPT. But you can use this value if you absolutely have to use it. I just don't really advise it. And then finally, we have max players per team. This is just saying, what's the maximum number of players per team I want in each lineup? I almost always leave this at 3. For like 9 or 10 game NBA slates, I usually set this at 2. And that kind of varies. There are certain examples. The Pelicans the other night in that game against Cleveland, when everybody was out, that was a slate where I turned up max players per team to 3, just because I knew that I was probably going to end up wanting lineups with 3 Pelicans. But for the most part, for large, like 9 or 10 game, 8 game, I usually set this to 2. For a 6 gamer, 3 is probably fine. And then for a 2 gamer, I'll just turn this all the way up to like 8 on DraftKings and just allow as many. If we get like a huge stack of players, they probably won't simulate that great together anyway. And so that's fine. Okay. Team stacks. We don't really use this for NBA. This is more important for MLB and for NFL. When we are generating MLB and NFL lineups, we have settings that say, so let's pull up NFL really quick. What is this? This is the Monday, Thursday. We got this flea flicker. Oh, that's kind of annoying. Let's try Thanksgiving. We have any good contests? A 4-4-4-4 on Thanksgiving. That's fun. Nice little wildcat. Okay. Might need to be doing some filtering here. But basically, when we're generating lineups for NFL or MLB, there's a setting in here that says percent of field using stacks. So in this case, the wildcat here is 3,000 entries. If we say 60% of the field is using stacks, these numbers, by the way, are estimated from using the super large field milli maker stuff or the flea flicker. 60% is a pretty good number. So it's stack in NFL is considered to be anything with quarterback, receiver, quarterback, and at least one pass catcher, we'll call it. So we set that to be about 60%. That's about right. So if you were to sim this wildcat in NFL, you get up about 1,800 lineups that are stacks. And then if you wanted to tweak how much you're getting of each quarterback or stacks of each team, we could change these. So I think what's going to happen here is actually you can leave all the teams that aren't playing to 100, and you could set like, or you could set them to 0. But I think you'd want to leave them at 100. But anyway, you could set this to be like 25% Dallas, 25% Detroit. And now we would end up, if we were to run the sim, we'd end up with 25% Cooper Rush stacks, 25% Jared Goff stacks. Now, with NFL, we're kind of already handling this through quarterback ownership, but it is especially handy for MLB when people are explicitly stacking like 5 or 6 players from a team. And also, it is kind of nice to like adjust, like, okay, I know I'm going to want a lot of Detroit stacks, so I can quickly just say, I want 100% Detroit stacks. I just want to see what are the best Detroit lineups. Okay, back to where we were, the way we were with NBA. Back to here. Accidentally deleted our preset. Here we go. Back to 49,500. We're going to do 15%. And I said, what was it? 60, 10, 20, 10? And oops. So we're going to update current preset. So now every time we pull up the small field, high dollar GPP, we'll have these settings set for us. And I said 8% here. Let's go ahead and update that. 5 generations is fine. And excuse me. Let's make sure that our jobs are importing, or our lines are importing. There we go. Okay. Now, next step, we have positional correlations and we have player correlations. So positional correlations are more useful for football and baseball a little bit, mostly football. As you can imagine, we have like Jokic here. Here's all of our default correlations we have set by position. These are just numbers that I've run for the past. I think I ran it since 2020, so 5 years worth of data. Just getting the correlations between each position on his own team and positions on the other team. If you don't change correlation values, this is what they're going to be when we sim. As you can see, they are very, very slight for NBA. We aren't messing around with these correlation values very much for NBA for obvious reasons. We do have negatives here, and the reason why we set negatives is like if you set a bunch of positives on players from the same game, you'd end up with like for the Nuggets, for example, you might end up with 5 players from the Nuggets. If you had all these be like 0.25 positive correlations, right? And so it's more useful in NBA to use player correlations. So now I can explicitly set Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray. And I actually would argue that they are positively correlated, right? And so I'd say, let's turn their correlation value to be like 0.2. So now they're going to be nice. They're going to simulate nice together, right? And we also could do like Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr., 2 shot takers in the same team. They don't often go off in the same game, right? So we could just set this to be like a high negative value. And now this is just going to penalize lineups with these two when we're running our simulations. So I recommend using this for NBA and NFL quite a bit. I use it all the time for Showdown, especially for both because Showdown is so script dependent. I mean, pretty obvious spots to, for example, tonight, Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. Derrick Henry he's catching more passes this year, but he's never been traditionally a big pass catcher. So he doesn't really correlate very well with Lamar Jackson. We might actually want to set that to be a negative tonight, for example, in our correlations. But we'll go ahead and run this like this just to show you. And we turned on our keep user lineups. And now let's go ahead and run this and see what we end up here. All right, here we go. So you see we loaded our 20 lineups, 375 lineup field, and we're also only generating 355 lineups, right? Because 375 minus 20. And now you can see across runs here, we're always generating 355 lineups. And that is because we uploaded our 20 lineups from the optimizer and we flipped on keep user lineups, right? So now the only lineups we're keeping between generations is just the user lineups. Now, if you wanted to just if you wanted to upload lineups and then just have the best lineups regardless of whether or not you imported them or not, then you could turn that setting off. It'll just bring back the best lineups from each sim. Come on. Show me the entry builder. Sometimes it gets a little funky here. Excuse me. Why am I not seeing my results page? What's going on? It's okay. So let's use a sim that completed. So now, once our sims are done, we have our entry builder here. So we have nice little, this nice table here. These are all the lineups that we've generated, and it's just going to return back the top lineups by lineup score. I'm looking at optimizer results. Here's simulator results. So if we go over here, we can see our lineup score. And so now we can see, obviously, they're sorted. And this was the one where we set Jaden Ivey, but you have like a ridiculous projection, right? That's how we get this 386 projection. Let's not use that, and let's try to understand why this thing didn't like finish. That's kind of weird. Let's try running that again. I feel like I don't know. I don't know why that didn't complete. This is what happens when you try to demo live technology. Every time, without fail, something happens. Come on. I know you want to. Let's see if there's a bug happening on the back end here that's causing this to not output for us. It's so weird. Might be something I have to fix really quick before the slate locks, because I don't know why that's not working for us. So we're gonna look at here, and let me just see if there's something buggy. Yep. Huh. Okay. Well. All right. I think it's a user lineup issue. My apologies. Let's just clear those out and resend this thing really quick, just so I can show you the entry builder. I'll have that fixed here in a second. I know what the issue is. It has to do with NAN values in our ROIs because of these user lineups. I screwed something up with them. But that will be fixed. So now, excuse me. So we're rerunning this thing, keeping 345 lineups each time. Job complete. Voila. Okay, so now we simmed this contest 5 times. So I made the entry builder. If you see this screen, you can just refresh it. And what is going on? Maybe it's this contest. Let's try simming. Let's try simming the zone. A 6,000 entry contest. We'll leave the same settings. This will take a little bit longer. So this is 6,000 entries. You'll see how long this takes. It really won't be too bad. Probably be about 4 or 5 minutes. Probably maybe even less than that, actually. So the first contest simulation is always going to be the longest because the way that Python works kind of has to like warm up, grease the gears a little bit before before the next few simulations will be much quicker. So this is going to be the slowest field, and then they'll start zooming. Here we go. Now we're moving. So you can see 8% of 5,900, or actually, I don't know if I set this 8% or 5%. Almost done. Told you to start going a lot faster. All right. And okay. So here's our hey, Shaden Sharp. How about that? Blazers legend, Shaden Sharp. The next Kobe, as they call him. So here's our entries. So here's we simulated 5,945 entry contest. If we were to click download all lineups up here, we did 5 generations, and so we should end up. I'll just tell you because it's going to take forever to import into Google Sheets. Let's see how many lineups we got. 27,706 unique lineups here. So we've generated about 30,000 lineups we've tested against this. Excuse me, against the zone. Okay. And so here's the ones that we ranked by our custom lineup score that we set. And so you can see kind of the ROIs are bouncing around here. Here's one with our top lineup isn't even the highest ROI. It's actually the second one I think is the highest ROI. Yep. So we can sort. So now we have this nice screen that kind of breaks everything down. So field projection, this is just like if you ever change the field points or field projection values on our importer, you will sum that up for you here. ROI is our simulated ROI across all the contest fields that this lineup appeared in. So for this contest, it's not the highest payout, so only about 300 is the top ROI. Excuse me. Ceiling is the top simulated score for each lineup across all the simulations we ran. So like for this top lineup here was kept, so he's using 5 different, all 5 field simulations. The highest fantasy point score we saw for it was 409 fantasy points. I used to think that was kind of ridiculous, and now the start of this year in NBA, it's been absolutely insane. All the chalk going off, so I actually think these numbers are pretty good. Kind of like verifying my work a little bit. But we can see like this lineup down here actually has a higher ceiling than this one, but doesn't sim quite as well. Actually, ROI wise, it does sim a little bit better, but it doesn't fit into our lineup score as well. And so these little bars here by the player names, we can turn that off here with this exposure button. I always leave it on. It's a nice little shorthand way to see how much we're getting of each player. So like Bob Williams here, 75% for Bob Williams. I know Klingon and Ayton are still out for the Blazers, but Bob Williams is like famously a trick or treat player. He's very dependent on stocks. I'm not sure how I feel about 75% of him, but that's kind of ownership dependent. I'm kind of getting too far into the slate. So 60% own. Personally, I'd be tempted to be under here on Rob Williams off the slate. But I know why he's chalked today. But now we can quickly see he's the kind of the highest owned player we got. Just look at this green bar. So we go back over here. Average cash won is just the actual dollar value on average that this contest won. So $5 entry, 285% ROI, $19. Kind of makes sense. Here's how much salary it uses, the type. So, excuse me, this is what Chan was talking about earlier. If we had imported our optimizer lineups, and I'm going to fix this before the slate locks, I promise, we can change these filters to make sure we can only get generated, which is like lineups that were generated by our simulator, or Opto, which is just lineups that you imported. So if you only want to look at your imported lineups, you click on Opto only. But we're going to leave that at all. Primary stack, all we're doing is just for NFL and for MLB, we're actually like deciding based on how we generate the lineup, what the stack is. For NFL, the primary stack is always the quarterback. For NFL Classic, that is. For Showdown, the stack is just going to be the team with the captain. So like in tonight's game, a Lamar Jackson lineup that's ball 1 for primary stack would be a Lamar Jackson and 5 Chargers. Secondary stack is just the team that occurs the second most often in the lineup. So getting a lot of Portland and Charlotte today. Not surprised. Portland's missing some guys, but interesting to see how chalky they will be. Geometric mean here, this is just like a geometric mean is a nicer way to represent lineup ownership instead of just summing ownership. We have ownership sum here, but this is kind of like a way to look at like the average ownership for each player, but not quite like the traditional mean. So like one way you can use geo mean is you can flip it around and make it an exponent, and then you can get an idea. If you were to take, I believe it is, you can look it up, I promise, but I believe it is this number to this exponent will tell you, actually it's 5945 to the 1 over this value will tell you how many estimated duplicates you have in that with that lineup in that contest. So So it's a nice shorthand way of getting like your expected duplicates. Here, sim dupes is how often each lineup was duplicated in each contest sim RAM. So on average, this lineup was actually duplicated twice. This LaMelo, Shaden Sharp, Brandon Miller, DeAndre Hunter, blah, blah, blah lineup. On average, we saw it duplicated. So it was duplicated once. Excuse me. Duplicated twice on average. So not really ideal, actually. We might want to tweak our settings a little bit, right? Here's our ownership sum. Here's our actual probabilities of these lineups cashing in the contest. Here's our probability of it finishing at top 1%. So you can see these all grade out really well in terms of top 1%. And here's the actual win probability. Again, these are all generated from the actual simulations. It took me forever to figure out how to get these values and do it right. And I'm pretty confident in these numbers. Then we have some median, some like variance metrics here of these stats. So we get some median ROI, standard deviation of ROI, just to give you an idea of how variant the ROI is for these lineups. We also have the min and the max here. We have a duplicate, kind of same thing, a variance for duplicates. This gives you a range of outcomes for duplicates, much more useful in Showdown, where duplicates really matter a lot more, or for MMA. And then we have fields kept. So fields kept is how often we carried over one lineup from one generation to the next. So like this first lineup here with 4 fields kept, it basically means that we generated it in the first simulation we ran, and then we kept it because this lineup score was so good. We kept it across all generations. Excuse me. So that's kind of the meat and potatoes here of the sims. Then we have some filtering here we can do with the entry builder. So all these values we can enter on. So like I could change, let's say that for my geo mean, I want all my lineups with geo mean to be less than or equal to 12. Let's try 0.12 and see what happens. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's another bug I'm about to fix and right when I get off this video. So let's refresh the page. So like if you get to this part, you can refresh the page. Here we go. And I want to look at lineups. So our top projection here is 270. I'm going to guess. I'm going to actually look and tell you. The top projected lineup right now on Stochastic is 276. So it's actually not the best lineup across all the ones we ran. But so let's go to 150 here. I kind of want to see if we get, so here's a 273. So let's say, for example, I know that I don't want to get lineups too close to the optimal because I'm using stochastic projections here. And I feel like if any lineup over 270 is going to be duplicated just because it's using stochastic projections, right? This is a large field contest. So we could just set up a filter here, less than or equal to, and we'll just say 269. Nice. So every lineup now, when we refine our entries, we click apply, boom. Now we have all these lineups are going to be under 269 projection. Here's a 269 right here, 259, and so on. So you can filter all these columns that way. I could filter down to be like, okay, let's say that Toronto is like a 15-point underdog tonight. I don't actually remember who they're playing. I gotta check on that. But let's say, for example, they're a huge underdog. I don't really want to play a bunch of them. So, I don't want to play a big stack. So let's just turn off Tor 3 lineups. Now we're going to refine our entries, and we won't have any Toronto 3s in here. I don't think they were simming well anyway, but just for reference, we could do that also with like Charlotte tonight if we really wanted to. I don't think we necessarily want to, but we refine it. And here we go. Excuse me. And every time we make a change now, our exposures are getting updated, right? So it's like refining. And we also can set up min unique. So I usually will, for NBA, will do 2 or 3, depending on how many lineups are playing and what size the contest is, what size the slate is. Excuse me. So now each lineup is going to have 3 uniques between each other. Okay. Now, lastly, we have our player and team exposures. Team exposure for NBA, not that useful. I pretty much ignore it and just handle it through our stack filters. More useful for MLB and for NFL. So like we could limit how many Dallas stacks we get, right? We could change just like 15. I'm not actually sure if this will work for NBA because like stacks are kind of okay. Perfect. So now we set Dallas max. We want to max 15% Dallas stacks, and so we ended up here 15%. And so player exposure. So now like, okay, I just talked about how Bob Williams tonight 60% own. He could be a trick or treat player. He's very stock dependent to hit upside, And so let's say that I just, I don't want to play him at all. Or like I want to play, I want to be way under the field tonight on Bob Williams. So let's go ahead. I could change this to like 15% Bob Williams and apply. And now we scroll down, he'll be down here. There he is, Bob Williams, 15%. And, I'm the world's #1 Shaden Sharp fan, and he's only at 23%. I want to set him to like 75%. Let's just get as much Shaden Sharp tonight as we can. It's baby Kobe, baby T-Mac, whatever you want to call him. He's the next great two guard in the NBA. Here we go. So now we have him in 75% of our lineups. Just kind of browsing through here, seeing him in a bunch of these. And another thing you'll notice, so remember, we're sorting on lineup score here, right? And we're going to end up down here at the bottom. If we are just keeping sorting our lineup score, all these lineups at the bottom are going to have Shaden Sharp, because what we're doing is these are like constraints that we are putting on the exposures, right? So we have this giant pool of 30,000 lineups that we generated. We're getting the top 150 by lineup score. And now we're kind of setting these constraints, right? We set our projection constraint. We set our stat constraint. And now we're setting our player exposure constraint. And so now what's happening is in order to hit our threshold here of 75% Shaden Sharp, all these lineups at the bottom are going to have Shaden Sharp, because these are lineups not going to have that great of lineup scores according to the lineup score that we set, that the custom weights that we set. And so they're kind of getting put into here, right? So here's a bunch of Shaden Sharp at the bottom. And now you'll also see these ROIs for these lineups. They aren't simming that great because we're kind of forcing them in. So my advice generally is, yes, you want to kind of like fix your exposures a little bit, but you want to be very careful that by fixing your exposures, you aren't just bringing in a bunch of bad lineups. So a better way, if you have time, and with NBA, you may not have time all the time, but a better way to do it is if we were to go back into here, and I'm not going to resim the whole contest, but if we go back into our projections, and I just like the spot for Shaden Sharp, I'm not really going to tweak exposure too much for him. What I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to change the projection. I'm going to change it to like 40. Now that's ridiculous to be like 8 points off of the field. You could do it that way. Like if you know ball and you think he's better, you think your projections are better or whatever. 8 points is pretty far away to get away from like a projection source, unless there's like some kind of minutes discrepancy or something weird. But I think it's a good idea in general to change this to be like 37, 38. So you're up his projection by like 20%, 10%. You'll end up with a lot more. And so my general advice is don't like hard force minimum exposures in. Just like barely tweak some of these projections a little bit. And when you are tweaking projection here and you're not tweaking field points here, this player is going to simulate better, right? Because he's being compared against what the field thinks. Excuse me. All right. And so that's kind of my general advice for how to like force in exposure. Yes, if we're kind of in a time crunch like we often are for NBA, we can just force in exposures like this. I do it sometimes for NBA if I just like a spot for a player. We also can click the lock button, get 100%. Here's Najee Marshall. I could lock him in if I wanted to. We also could click the trash can and get 0%. And finally, we can click filter, and now we can filter to all the Najee Marshall. So like I clicked filter here. Now he's highlighted. I can see all the lineups he's in. So just a nice shorthand way for you to see what lineups players are showing up in. So anyway, once we're done, and when I say, okay, this is the 150 set I want, then we just click export 150 entries, and we have a nice, this is pretty much all ready to go. The CSV you get out of clicking this export button. So all the 150 you want, and then you can just copy and paste it into your DK entries or your FD entries CSV. And if you want to see all the lineups we generated, this download all lineups button is always available to you. Like for NFL, where we're getting like the 200,000 entry contest, you'll only be able to run like one generation of that just because it takes forever. But you could run like 1,000 sims of a 200,000 entry contest and run a couple of generations and just end up with a huge lineup pool that you could then apply your own filtering to. I know a couple people that actually use our GitHub repo, and they just use a simulator to just generate gigantic fields, and then they'll optimize down off of that. So that's a viable way to use our tools as well. I just kind of trust the sims and an optimizer, just kind of like the way we have them in the web app. Okay, so I think that's it. We got about 30 minutes to NBA lock. I'm going to go back and I'm going to fix the two problems I just found. They're both pretty simple. I know exactly what they are. They won't be very difficult. One has to do with this NAN ROIs on user lineups, and the other one was there was one other one that I was going to fix that was pretty simple. I don't remember. I'll have to think of it. But anyway, so I'm going to go fix those. Any last questions from everybody before I jump off? I'm happy to take questions for a few minutes here. If you guys want to know like how to do something, kind of like any advice or anything, happy to answer any questions. So I'll give you guys about 90 seconds. Yep. Thank you. Thanks for tuning in. What was the other issue? I'm really trying to remember. There was the negative ROI, the ROI thing, and oh, it had to do with geomean. Geomean needs to be fixed. So geomean right now, the filter for geomean expects you to have decimals and it's whole numbers. So like where is it here? So like if I change this to like 15, value between 0 and 1, these are whole numbers. That's easy fix. I'll tell we'll fix that quickly. So I'm gonna fix those two, and if there's nothing else, I'm going to call it. What do you mean by this, OA? About the code coming along when? For what? I'm not sure what you mean. You're talking about projections, maybe? Projections in a week or two, probably. We have our partner already picked out and everything. We're just kind of figuring out some of the back end stuff. So that's kind of the easy part, I think. Making sure it's all automated for you guys. Oh, yeah, code along. Next Thursday, December 5th, I'm going to be doing a code along. So what I'm going to be doing is showing we've been doing a series of videos now, educational ones, Chan and I, kind of like trading off duties there. So we have one that I did about using LLMs, so like ChatGPT for DFS. I did one about creating post-contest sims. That's kind of like the starting point for us building that into our app. And Chan did one about scraping Pinnacle's API for getting like player props data and odds data. And next Thursday, I'm going to be doing one that shows how to scrape the NBA API and calculate player correlations. It should be pretty useful for every sport, I would imagine, because it's going to be teaching you how to kind of like access an API, how to read network requests, and then how to actually calculate correlations, download player game logs. We'll just do like the 2024 season, kind of get the correlations for everybody. So that way we all have those. So yeah, next Thursday, I think it's already scheduled. So tune in. And also, I think Chan and I are going to be doing a Thanksgiving show Wednesday. We haven't confirmed it yet, but I was kind of hoping we could. We'll make sure. I think we'll let you know about that. And then Friday, I believe we're doing our normal NFL show. So make sure you catch us on those. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. I'm going to be saving this video. It's kind of like we have an old how to use a simulator video. I'm going to be saving this one as a new version of it. So that way everybody has it. And I might do another one for NFL, maybe for Thanksgiving, just because like some of the bugs that we found here, I might have those fixed in time for Thanksgiving. So make sure everybody how to do that. So that's it for everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate your support, and good luck tonight with the NFL Showdown and with the NBA. Have a good one.